Everybody, my name is Brian Dodd, and it is such an honor to come to you today and be part of this incredible lineup of speakers. And as I really delve into the process, I really discovered what the purpose of First Impressions was. And if you're wondering what is the purpose of our hospitality team, of our ushers, of our greeters, of our parking team, everybody, welcome desk, everybody involved in that process. The purpose of First Impressions is evangelism. So let me explain. And I came across two very interesting studies, two different studies, but when you combine them, it unearthed an amazing truth that revolutionized my life. And the first study was this. People, over 90% of people, this study was done in the early 90s, over 90% of people knew when they visited a church within the first 12 minutes if they were coming back or not. And so I really began to unpack that. And I'm like, well, is that possible? You know, they've not heard a message. You know, they've not gone through visitation. If they did Sunday school and church, you know, they were just in Sunday school. They've not even gone to a service yet. Is it possible that someone can make a decision about an organization or a church or an experience that quickly within the first 12 minutes? And like I said, I began to think about it. And Hollywood movies make the first scene extremely dramatic. They want to build conflict. Man against man against nature, man against himself. They want to build that conflict in the opening scene. And you can tell a lot about a movie by the opening scene. The second thing I thought about was my personal life. You know, if you go to a family reunion or a family gathering or a holiday visit with family, you pretty much know pretty quick if this is going to be a good experience or if there's tension in the room and this family environment can become very dysfunctional. You knew that pretty quickly. And at that time, I was recently married, been married about 4 or 5 years. I fell in love with my wife on the first date. So I knew that very quickly. So yes, the ability in my mind to grasp in the first 12 minutes if somebody's coming back or not, I grasped that very, very quickly. The second thing I grasped is this, totally separate study. Over 90% of the people came back to church because of the pastor. And as I took these two separate studies and combined them, the interesting thing about it is in many church services, there is no pastor in the first 12 minutes. You're dealing with parking teams and ushers and greeters and children's check-in and welcome desk and ushers, and you're also dealing with the very first song. And when you put those two studies together, here's what I was able to gather, okay? It is those two studies, when you combine them, was the truest data-driven understanding of the principle we all know as leaders, that the people are a picture of the leader. So if I go to a church and everybody I encounter in those first 12 minutes, I'm going to know about the pastor because I've met the people. So when someone's driving up to a church, number one, they're probably very nervous about the experience. Unless they have a major crisis in their life that I'm going here for answers this morning, they're nervous about coming to church for a myriad of reasons. As people are very tense coming to church on a Sunday morning, if I realized that as the parking team, what we could do is create an environment where they could get into a spot quickly, be welcomed in a warm, loving fashion, that would break down that barrier. Then the next place they would go is they would go towards the doors, and they would begin to walk into our facility. And here's what I would always coach our people to do that were greeters at the outside doors. It doesn't matter. I live in Georgia. It doesn't matter if it's 95 degrees with 100% humidity. It doesn't matter if it's raining during the winter or snowing. The greeters needed to be on the outside of the door. And here's why. Back in the 70s, there was this very famous movie called Saturday Night Fever. And John Travolta became a star in that movie. And so what would happen is the first scene, it was several minutes into the movie, but he came up to the disco, and there was these doors, and then when Travolta went through the doors and those doors opened, America saw the New York disco scene for the very first time. And see, when people are walking up to a church door, they're nervous. They're wondering what's on the other side. Are we going to have to sing? Are the people weird? Am I dressed appropriately? They're going through this entire process. So here's what I want with those greeters at the outside doors. I want them on the outside of the doors. A lot of greeters, inexperienced greeters, will tell me, Brian, I can stay on the inside and I can see them coming. Here's what I want you to know. That is a cardinal sin of being in first impressions. It's not important that you see them. It's important that they see you. Because what they see in you will be a picture of what they'll see when they go through the doors. So then they go into the doors and then they head towards the children's area. And at the children's area, here's the important thing there. Even lost people love their children as much as Christians. Okay? Everybody loves their children. Everybody wants their children to have an amazing experience in life and reach their full potential. So here's the thing. When they hand off their child to a stranger, if they feel loved as they go through the check-in process and actually go to the room and hand off their child, if they feel loved, if their child feels value, when they peek into the room, if they see that their child's going to have a great experience, here's what goes through their mind. I will begin to value most what they value most because they're valuing most what I value most, which is my child. Because here's what happens. If you don't make that handoff wonderful at the children's experience, by the time they're in the service, what will happen is 5-10 minutes into the sermon, the wife will look over at the husband and go, I just want to go check in on Johnny real quick. I'll be right back. And the pastor never has a chance because the person is not hearing the life-changing message because the child is not being properly cared for. But the child is properly cared for in this instance. They come back to the service. A very kind usher gets them to a seat of their choosing. Here's another thing I'd recommend, and I had this experience at New Spring Church, so I learned this concept from them. They had identified what were the best seats in the auditorium in terms of space with the aisle seats, so you had plenty of foot room, easy to get out. And so they had already blocked off all the best seats in the entire auditorium, and those were the seats that they saved for first-time visitors. So if your parking team can designate them in a good spot, radio people as they're coming in, identify all the first-time visitors, get them to the best seats. And then here's what will happen. By the end of the first verse of the first song, because they'll hear that first verse and they'll go, yo, that's different. That wasn't what my grandmother's church was like. And by the end of the first song, they'll go, this is a great experience. Parking went great. Everybody was nice. Man, what they're doing for our kids is absolutely amazing. Little Johnny is going to have the time of his life. These seats are wonderful. And that music is incredible. What you've done at that point, because you've managed first impressions so well, is now they can sit comfortably, their heart has been softened, and now they can hear the message from the pastor, which could change their life for all of eternity, because you've broken down every barrier that Satan would wish to erect that would allow them not to hear that message. So, the purpose of first impressions, the purpose of first impressions is evangelism. And how do you do evangelism? By being very strategic and very systematic in how you break down all the barriers Satan wants to put up and to distract their mind and to give them a negative experience. But when you do that, they'll relax, their heart will be softened, and they'll hear a message that can change their life for eternity.